All right, what's going on? What's going on? Welcome to this edition to Creative Real Estate with Cash Money Mike. I appreciate you being here. We're going to talk a little bit about seller finance, going to talk a little bit about creative real estate. If you guys are just joining me here for the first time, my name is Mike Termini. I am a seller finance educator inside the space. What does that mean? That means that I show students from across the country each and every month how to buy properties without the use of the bank by actually getting the seller to be the bank for you, which is kind of cool. And there's a few different ways you can do that. And I'm going to break down a little bit about some of the mindset that has to happen when you're buying these properties, how to find these properties, trying to find the best people that would ultimately sell you a piece of property on seller finance, and the advantages for both the seller and you as the buyer. All right, so I'm going to be showing you a bunch of stuff here on this on the bottom ticker. You could find me on Instagram. You could find me on Facebook. We are live inside the Facebook business page. We're also live inside Creative Real Estate with Cash Money Mike Facebook group. We are live on YouTube, and I am not live on Instagram. I decided to save all of this stuff for you guys who are on these different platforms, so I appreciate you. Okay. Again, you'll see the ticker down at the bottom. You could find all my handles on there and everything else that we got going on. Okay. If you guys have any questions, make sure that you put your questions inside the chat. I am happy to answer any questions that you have. I won't get off here till I got all your questions answered, but I will only be on here tonight for maybe about a half hour because my daughter has a softball game, so I'm going to be go checking her out. All right, so seller finance, creative finance. When you think about creative real estate is really an umbrella of sorts of all these different strategies that you can deploy. And if you're just seeing me for the first time and you're just getting started in real estate, there's probably never been a better time to get started because in all my 23 years of doing this, I can promise you that I've seen up markets and down markets and sideways markets. And people are always asking me, when is the best time to get involved? And my answer is always, well, when is the best time to plant a tree? It was yesterday, right? But what's so interesting about some of the stuff that's going on out in the actual market is that we don't really worry about a lot of those things, kind of like interest rates. We don't worry about those. We don't worry so much about purchase price. There's different ways and different things that you could do with creative real estate that make it absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing when you know what you're looking for and kind of how to pull some of those levers. I got a question in the chat here. It says, do you buy in blue states? The answer is no. I'm never going to buy in a blue state. Always gonna buy in a red state. But before I dive a little bit deeper into like blue and red states and why, again, let's kind of understand creative real estate and a little bit about the strategies, and then I'll explain to you why. So there are types of markets out here. There's the housing market, the rental market, the commercial market, these different types of markets. And depending on which asset type you buy, because the asset class is going to be real estate, whether you're into buying single family homes or maybe you're into buying multifamily homes, will determine, will kind of weigh heavily on whether or not you're buying in a blue state or in a red state. Now, um, the whole trick to this game is to find a piece of property, ultimately add some value to that piece of property through some kind of rehab or some kind of rental increase, and then refinance it. So when you get into a blue state and it's real favorable towards the tenants, not an ideal situation for you as a buyer. So that's the reason why I don't like blue states. I prefer to be in red states. Okay. Nothing political. It's just that I'm really looking at the tenant laws. I'm not looking at whether or not, who it's governed by or anything like that. But obviously, it does play a small part in it. All right. So if you're just getting started in real estate and you don't know which strategy to actually pull the trigger on, it can get a little bit confusing. And when you're pulled in a bunch of different ways, it's super important that you get clear on what you want to have happen before you decide to go ahead and actually try to purchase a piece of real estate. And there's really three parts to a real estate deal. There's what happens when you buy it, there's the middle piece, and then there's the end piece, which is what happens when you sell it. And for so many years, I thought that I was doing the right thing by buying a piece of property, renovating the piece of property, and then putting it back on the market and selling it. When I first got started, I thought I was doing amazing. I said, "Oh man, I'm making all this money," but at the end of the day, what I was really doing was I was creating this hamster wheel of sorts that I couldn't get out of because even though the money was good, I still wasn't doing as well as I could have done by actually holding the real estate. And I didn't understand that until years down the line when I was like, man, what am I doing wrong? I keep hearing about all these guys that are connected and gals that are connected to, 95% of the people who are millionaires are all connected in real estate. And I'm making these good rips. I'm making a 20,000 and a 30,000 and a $40,000 rip. But at the end of the day, there were two words that I kind of grew up, my old man would teach me to kind of hate. And one was debt and one was tax. And it's through the debt and the tax that you actually get wealthy. So when I was renovating these properties and I was selling them, the capital gains tax when you sell them is the biggest piece of the puzzle. And it's so overlooked. So even though I would make, $50,000, maybe 30% of that would have to go to the IRS. And then if I wholesaled a piece of real estate where all I did was sign a contract and then sell my interest in the contract to somebody, again, that was taxed at a different rate because it's earned income. And when you when you get around to actually purchasing a piece of property that you're going to hold for the long term, that's where all the magic happens because you could technically sell the house. Well, there's really two ways to get your money out of a piece of property. So let's just talk about a single family. There's really two ways to get your money out of a single family home or a single family house. Big difference between a house and a home. Big difference between a primary and a rental. Big difference between a primary and somebody who uses a piece of property in a different way. And that's super important to remember ultimately when you're going into conversations that you don't say the wrong thing. But ultimately, in order to get your money out of a piece of property, there's two ways to do that. You could either sell the piece of property, take all the profit and pay the tax, or not have to sell the property, pull all the money out of it that you would have gotten out of it had you sold it, not sell it, and ultimately keep it inside your portfolio. And the way that that's done is through the refinance component. Now, here's where the disconnect comes in with people. They go, well, refinance, I'm going to be paying a higher interest rate. Why would I refinance it? Don't I want to have it paid off? And the answer is, well, that depends on what you want to have happen. If you're looking to pay off the property, that would be the second mistake that you would be making because I made the same mistake. I would say, well, wait a minute. I'm putting all this money into it. I'm rehabbing it. I'm selling it. I'm making a good profit. And then ultimately, I'm having to pay tax on it. And then the second mistake would be me actually paying the piece of property off because when they're encumbered with debt, good debt, they're a little bit safer. Nobody can take them from you because there's a loan on it, and there's no tax on debt. So here's the whole name of the game, regardless on how you buy it, right? So again, three parts to a deal. There's what happens when you buy it, the use for the property, and then what happens when you sell it. So if you buy a piece of property for your primary use and then you sell it, as a primary homeowner, if you lived in the property for 2 out of the last 5 years, you don't owe any capital gains tax. That's the biggest tax break that we get as U.S. citizens here and primary home owners. But the minute you buy something from an investment standpoint, you do not get that luxury. You have to pay the tax on it if you sell it. But you only pay the tax on it if you sell it, and you only pay the tax if you realize the gain. In other words, that's why it's called capital gains tax. If you bought a piece of property for $100,000 and you sold it for $200,000, there is a $100,000 gain. And depending on what your tax bracket looks like, you'll have to pay anywhere from 20, 15 to 30% to the IRS in capital gains tax. Now, if I bought a piece of property that I used debt to buy it. In other words, I took out a loan, and I put a renter in there, and the renter actually paid the loan, and there was some money left over for me each and every month. That would be my cash flow. And ultimately, what happens is that over time, the value of the piece of property goes up, along with the rental rates that go up. And if you were a primary homeowner, you would sit back and you would wait. You'd put your hands behind your head, you'd sit back and you'd wait all this time in hopes that the value of the property went up. And my wife and I are both primary homeowners, right? We bought a piece of property. Actually, this piece of property that we're in right now, we bought 7 years ago. We bought 4 acres here. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. And ultimately, we bought it for a really good price. And over time, the more time we stay in here, the more equity grows inside the piece of property. And as the equity grows, I have a choice. I can go back to the bank and say, hey, give me some of that equity. And then I'll have a brand new payment, which for me doesn't make sense because I'm using it as my primary. But if this was a rental for me and I bought it at a really good price and I had a tenant in here and I waited 7 years or 8 years for the equity to go up, I can then go back to the bank, pull the same amount of equity out. I would have a new payment, but that tenant would cover the payment. And every 5 or 7 years, I would go back to this piece of property and I would literally wring out the money because when I get the money out of it, it's tax free. So I stopped selling property. And when I stopped selling property is when everything had changed for me because I wound up putting all of these properties on a sheet, on a balance sheet, P&Ls, and all these different things where my net worth started to grow because I had so many assets that I became more lendable in the eyes of the bank. So for those of you who believe that it's difficult to get started, it really isn't. You just have to understand the way to buy a piece of property, and then you have to understand the money game. And if your intention is to buy a piece of property and ultimately cash flow and take the remaining of that cash flow and throw it towards the loan to try to pay it off sooner, if that's your cup of tea, then pay it off. But for me, I prefer to use the bank's money to go buy more property. Now, let's get into creative real estate just a little bit. Now, if you wholesale property, you've got to buy a piece of property at a discount. If you novate property, you're going to change the parties of the contract and actually change the contract around. If you try to subject to a property, that means you're going to go ahead and make payments on behalf of the seller. And then if you sell or finance a property, what's so interesting about this is that you actually get to structure your own loan. And it's the least risky of deals, which is what I love. I love, real estate is a pretty litigious area. So you want to make sure that you got all your T's crossed and your I's dotted. And with seller finance, all you're doing is you're getting the seller to be the bank for you. So in any transaction, there is the buyer and there is the seller. There's the buyer or the seller. Or there is the seller and the buyer, but the buyer can buy different ways, right? The buyer can buy in cash or the buyer can buy in a loan. And then when it comes to the loan, there's the borrower and there's the lender, right? So it's really about so there's 3 parts of a deal, but when you're going to buy a piece of property, you're either going to buy it for cash, or you're going to buy it with a loan, period. There's no other way to buy it. You buy it with a loan or you buy it for cash. And when you buy a piece of property with a loan, you can't walk into a bank and go, "Hey, Mr. Bank, how you doing? I want you to give me $1 million." They're going to go, "Hold on, Mike, not that fast, right?" You're going to have to show me all your bank statements. You're going to have to show me your W-2. You're going to have to qualify. We want to run your credit. We want to know what your DTI is. And then we'll let you know what we agree to give you. And you'll agree to pay this interest rate or we won't give you the loan. So we don't get to walk into a bank and ultimately make our own rates or make our own terms. But with seller finance, if we find a piece of property that's completely paid off and we understand how to structure a loan, ultimately we could pay this piece of property off 10 times faster than we would if we had we done it traditionally. So if any of you would like to pay off a loan faster, put a little fire emoji inside the chat. We've got about 6 of you watching on here. Put a little fire emoji inside the chat if you would like to pay off your loan or pay down your loan in record time. All right, let me get you some more captions here. Again, put your questions inside the chat bot and inside the chat box. All right, awesome. Okay, awesome. All right, now, the reason why seller finance is so incredibly powerful is because if I structure a loan where I'm making a payment to a seller and it's going straight to the loan, what happens is this is the same mindset that you had when you bought a primary piece of property, which is to go into it and wait over time for it to appreciate. Well, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to wait for it to appreciate, but we're going to pay down the loan at the same rate, essentially creating so much equity inside the property at a rapid rate that it makes it easier for us to go to the bank and say, "Hey, Mr. Bank, it's time for you to give me my money." And then when they give you the money, that you actually take it tax free. So by waiting all of the time that you would normally wait and being able to pay it down is absolutely amazing. That's two ways that you make money in seller finance. But let's not forget about the difference between the money that you're putting out to the seller and the money that you're taking in from the rental. The difference between the money that you're putting out and the money that you're taking in is the spread. So now, as we wait for appreciation and we pay down the loan, we're now going to add that cash flow to it and it gets even bigger. Then, through the tax advantages, because the government says to you, "Hey, you can depreciate the property." Not now we wait for the appreciation, we pay down the loan, we add in the cash flow, and we add in the appreciation and the depreciation. And ultimately, what we've done is we've 10x'd the equity inside of the property. Now, here's why it's so cool: is because most people are trying to buy a piece of property at a discount. And with seller finance, you could actually give sellers exactly what they want. Sometimes you can give them more than what they want. And you're going to want one thing in exchange for that, and that's going to be time. So I negotiate time over purchase price. I'll say to a seller, "Hey, I'm comfortable with the price that you're asking. I don't think we have to negotiate the price. All I would want some time to actually pay it off." And what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to create that spread in the cash flow. So when I make payments to the seller, I want to make sure that those payments are low. I want to make sure that I can get a high rental rate for it so that I've got a pretty good spread in there, right? And then ultimately, every time I make a payment to the seller, I don't want to try, I don't want to, well, I want to try to not pay any interest. I want to go ahead and have each payment that I make actually go straight to principal paydown. So think about this for a second. Every time I make a payment to the seller, I'm actually paying myself because I'm paying down the loan and I'm not paying any interest. Every time I'm making a payment to the seller, I'm creating cash flow. So every time I almost want to make the payment, right? I'm creating this cash flow because I was able to keep those payments low. Remember, the seller got more money than what they were asking. In exchange, I asked for a lower payment. Hypothetical, the payment is $500 a month and I can rent it for $1,500 a month. Every time I make that $500 payment, it's going right to principal paydown or coming right off the loan or coming right off the balance of the loan, all while I collect $1,000 a month positive. So that's where the real magic comes in, is that you're able to move some of the components around, knowing that the thing that's going to get the seller interested in your offer is going to be the fact that you might give them exactly what they're asking for after everybody else tried to buy it at a discount and sometimes overpay, when all you're trying to do is you're trying to get time. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about where the money goes. If I'm paying $500 a month and it's going straight to principal paydown, I would want to get as much time to pay it off as I possibly could, right? If I'm paying $500 a month down, that's $6,000 a year. If I bought a piece of property for $200,000 and I got 10 years to pay it off, every single payment that I made paid off $60,000 of that loan. But guess what happened over those 10 years? The value of it went up. And as I had a rental rate of $1,500 and I still made that $500 payment, I had $1,000 net. Now I've netted $12,000 a year on top of the $6,000 that I paid down. That's $18,000 a year that I'm actually making. Now I'm only feeling 12,000 of it, but the 6,000 is clicking off on the back end. And what you're doing is you're creating these huge spreads. So if I got 10 years to collect $12,000, that's $120,000, and I paid off $60,000. At 10 years, I've paid off $180,000 of a $200,000 loan. Now, could I have taken the $12,000 that I've collected each and every year and thrown it towards the back of the loan? Absolutely. How long would it take me to pay it off then? Maybe 5 years. So seller finance is very, very, very powerful, where you can create massive amounts of equity without having to wait for the market. You actually make the market, which is absolutely amazing. Okay. What I want to do is I want to invite you guys to head over to I want you to head over to you can scan this code right here. It's going to bring you to the Facebook group. If you are not part of the Facebook group, that's going to be an amazing place for you to go to. You guys will be able to you'll be able to interact with a bunch of different investors in there. I am also, well, I was going to, but maybe I won't. Maybe I'll do it right now for you. I'm going to add a little something right now, and you can go to www.mycreativedeal.com. And when you go to mycreativedeal.com, it's going to be right down there on the ticker. You go to mycreativedeal.com and it's going to send you to a low ticket funnel. So what a funnel is going to give you a little video there of what I do and how I do it. You're going to be able to buy a seller finance launch kit, which is amazing. This is like a 10 by 10 mini course that I put together. It shows you exactly how to get started in creative real estate, exactly how to get started in seller finance. I've got a bunch of goodies in there, like a flow chart that'll show you exactly how to stay on track, my exact script on how I speak to sellers. I've got the top 50 questions to ask in there, as well as a whole bunch of goodies. So if you go to mycreativedeal.com, what that'll do is that'll send you to the funnel, and you guys could learn more about that. Starting tomorrow, the promotion for Black Friday will be out. The promotion will be out. The discounts will not be out until Black Friday. But if you follow along on my Instagram, you'll be able to get on a VIP list that will give you all of the discount codes one day earlier. So all the discount codes will be emailed to you on Thursday. You could take advantage of all of those. I've got some amazing specials coming out. You're going to be able to take my actual seller finance training for right at about 75% off of normally what it is. You'll be able to join me in my mastermind group. You'll be able to access a bunch of different resources that I've got to help you find deals, identify deals, underwrite deals, structure deals, and most importantly, how to pitch deals. Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions for me before I head out? I said I was going to be nice and quick. That half hour went really quickly tonight. But if you have any questions, I'll stay on here for just a minute and see if you have any questions for me. I will be happy to answer them. I hope everybody is doing real well and you're putting a bunch of different deals together. I hope that you're successful in your real estate journey. I've got 23 years in the game, and I've got a bunch of crazy bumpy road behind me. But I've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. So yeah, happy to have you guys inside some of these groups. You can get connected to some of my students and get you inside the private Facebook group. All right, thanks for joining me here tonight. Make sure you're following me along on IG, YouTube, and Facebook, and we'll